crystal chandelier casts elegant shadows across Richard Blackwood's marble-floored dining room, where 30 of the city's wealthiest elite gather for his monthly networking dinner. The air thrums with the sound of expensive wine being poured and business deals being whispered between courses. Richard, a silver-haired man in his 50s wearing a tailored Italian suit, moves through the crowd with the confidence of someone who owns half the city's skyline. Maria Santos, a 35-year-old black woman in a crisp white uniform, weaves quietly between the guests, refilling wine glasses with practiced efficiency. Her movements are graceful, almost invisible to the powerful men and women who barely register her existence. She's learned to perfect this art of invisibility over 3 years of working in Richard's mansion. The evening takes a sharp turn when Maria approaches Richard's table to refill his glass. As she leans forward, her elbow accidentally catches the edge of a stack of documents beside Richard's plate. The wine glass tilts, sending deep red liquid cascading across the papers. The room falls silent as Richard's face transforms from casual arrogance to pure rage. "You clumsy fool!" Richard's voice booms across the room, causing every conversation to halt. "Do you have any idea what you've just done?" He snatches the wine-stained papers, shaking them in Maria's face. "These are contracts worth millions. Documents in Spanish that took weeks to prepare." Maria's hands tremble slightly as she reaches for a napkin. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Blackwood. I can help clean." "Help?" Richard's laugh is cruel and sharp. "You want to help? Fine. Translate this Spanish document right now, and I'll give you my entire monthly salary." He waves the papers mockingly. "But we both know that's impossible, don't we? People like you can barely read English, let alone Spanish." The guests murmur among themselves, some chuckling at what they assume is Richard's joke. A woman in pearls leans toward her companion and whispers loudly enough for Maria to hear. "Don't be so hard on her, Richard. What would someone like her know about foreign languages?" Maria's eyes flash with something deeper than hurt, but she keeps her voice steady. "I understand you're upset, Mr. Blackwood. Perhaps we should—" "Get out!" Richard's face is red with fury. "You're nothing but a maid, and you'll never be anything more. Clean up this mess and get back to where you belong, in the kitchen with the other help." As Maria bends to gather the scattered papers, her fingers pause on one of the documents. For just a moment, her eyes scan the text, and the corner of her mouth curves in the faintest suggestion of a smile. Carlos, the Mexican chef watching from the kitchen doorway, catches her whispered words in perfect Spanish. "Qué interesante. Este contrato en algunos problemos." The small apartment in East Harlem feels worlds away from the marble mansion where Maria spends her days. The walls are painted a warm yellow, and children's artwork covers the refrigerator. 8-year-old Isabella sits at the kitchen table, her dark curls bouncing as she practices her English homework. She looks up with bright eyes when Maria walks through the door, still wearing her white uniform. "Mami, you're home early," Isabella says, setting down her pencil. "Did something happen at work?" Maria hangs her coat on the back of a chair and sits beside her daughter. "Just a little accident, mi amor. Nothing to worry about." She examines Isabella's homework, her fingers tracing the carefully written sentences. "Your English is getting so good. Better than many of the people I work with." Isabella beams with pride. "Mrs. Garcia says I'm the smartest kid in class. She wants to put me in the advanced program next year." She pauses, studying her mother's face. "Mommy, why don't you teach at a school? You know so many languages." Maria's hand instinctively moves to the simple gold ring on her finger, the only piece of jewelry she wears. It's unremarkable to most people, but to Maria, it represents everything she's lost and everything she's fighting to rebuild. The ring belonged to Dr. Elena Vasquez, the linguistics professor who raised Maria after her parents died in Guatemala. Elena had insisted that knowledge was the only true wealth, the only thing that could never be taken away. "Sometimes, mija, Life takes us on different paths than we planned, Maria says softly. But every path teaches us something important. The apartment is modest but immaculate. Books in multiple languages line makeshift shelves, and Maria's laptop sits open on a small desk in the corner. Most evenings, after Isabella goes to bed, Maria spends hours helping other immigrant workers in the building with their English, or translating documents for families trying to navigate the complex immigration system. Her phone buzzes with a text from Carlos. "You okay?" "Mr. Blackwood was furious after you left. Mrs. Henderson is asking questions about you." Maria types back, "I'm fine. See you tomorrow." She doesn't tell Carlos about the contract she glimpsed, or about the glaring legal errors that could cost Richard millions. She doesn't mention that she recognized the Spanish company's name from her previous life, or that she knows exactly how the scam works. Some knowledge, she's learned, is dangerous to possess, especially when you're supposed to be invisible. Isabella falls asleep with her head on Maria's shoulder as they read together on the couch. Maria carries her daughter to bed, tucking her in with a gentle kiss. "Sweet dreams, mi amor. Tomorrow will be better." As Maria prepares for bed, she catches her reflection in the bathroom mirror. The woman staring back looks tired, older than her years, but behind the exhaustion, there's something else. A strength that 3 years of cleaning floors and enduring insults hasn't managed to break. She touches the gold ring again, remembering Elena's words. "The world will try to make you small, Maria, but knowledge makes you infinite." She has no idea that tomorrow will test just how infinite she really is. The next morning brings the first of many storms. Maria arrives at the mansion to find Mrs. Henderson, the stern-faced head housekeeper, waiting in the staff entrance with her arms crossed. The older white woman's disapproving expression has become familiar over the years, but today it carries extra venom. "Maria, there's been a complaint about your performance," Mrs. Henderson announces without preamble. "Mr. Blackwood's contract went missing after your incident last night." Maria sets down her cleaning supplies. "The contract didn't go missing. I saw him put it in his briefcase before I left." "Don't you dare contradict me," Mrs. Henderson snaps. "Mr. Blackwood discovered this morning that important documents were missing from his study. As the only person who had access to that room during the party, you're the obvious suspect." The accusation hangs in the air like poison. Maria feels the familiar weight of injustice settling on her shoulders. The same feeling she's carried since childhood, when teachers assumed she couldn't keep up, when college advisors suggested she choose more realistic career paths, when colleagues questioned whether she'd truly earned her achievements. "I didn't take anything," Maria says quietly. "You can check the security cameras." Mrs. Henderson's smile is cold. "The cameras in the study have been malfunctioning for weeks. How convenient." She pulls out a clipboard. "Mr. Blackwood has decided to implement new security measures. Your bag will be searched every day when you leave. Your pay is being reduced by 30% until further notice. And you'll be taking on additional duties, guard and maintenance, and caring for Mr. Blackwood's 3 German shepherds." Carlos appears in the doorway, his face troubled. "Mrs. Henderson, that's not fair. Maria is the most honest person here. She would never—" "No one asked for your opinion, Carlos," Mrs. Henderson cuts him off. "Unless you'd prefer to join her in the unemployment line?" Carlos falls silent, his eyes apologetic as he looks at Maria. She gives him a slight nod, understanding. They both need these jobs too desperately to risk losing them over principles. The weeks that follow blur together in a haze of humiliation and exhaustion. Maria's days start at 5 in the morning, tending to the garden in the pre-dawn darkness before the regular staff arrives. The German shepherds are aggressive and poorly trained, requiring constant vigilance. Her reduced salary barely covers rent and Isabella's school expenses. At home, Isabella notices the change immediately. "Mami, you're losing weight." Are you eating enough? Maria forces a smile. I'm just getting more exercise at work, mija. It's good for me. But Isabella isn't fooled. At 8 years old, she's already learned to read the worry lines around her mother's eyes. The way Maria's hands shake slightly when she thinks no one is watching. She starts saving half her lunch money, hiding the crumpled bills in a small box under her bed. The breaking point comes 3 weeks later, during Richard's monthly charity gala. The irony isn't lost on Maria as she serves champagne to guests who've paid thousands of dollars to attend an event supposedly raising money for underprivileged children. She overhears Richard's conversation with a group of investors near the bar. The problem with these people, Richard says, gesturing vaguely toward the kitchen where Maria and the other staff work, is that they have no ambition, no intellectual curiosity. They're content to do menial work because, frankly, that's all they're capable of. A woman in a glittering gown nods thoughtfully. It's really quite sad. The genetic limitations are so obvious when you work with them directly. Exactly, Richard continues, warming to his theme. Take my maid, for instance. 3 years she's worked here, and she's never once shown any interest in bettering herself. These people simply don't have the cognitive capacity for complex thought. Maria's grip tightens on the champagne tray. She's heard variations of this conversation dozens of times over the years, but tonight it hits differently. Maybe it's the exhaustion or the worry about Isabella, or simply the accumulation of 3 years of small cruelties. For the first time since she started working here, Maria feels something inside her begin to crack. The evening takes a dramatic turn when Richard's assistant rushes into the main hall, her face pale with panic. Mr. Blackwood, we have a problem. The translator for tomorrow's Spanish contract signing is in the hospital with food poisoning. The Barcelona investors fly out tomorrow night. If we don't complete this deal, find another translator, Richard barks. There must be dozens in the city. It's Sunday night, sir, and this is highly technical legal language. The few people I've reached want 48 hours minimum to prepare. And the fee would be, how much? $15,000 for 1 day. Richard's face turns purple. 15,000? To translate a simple contract? This is insane. Carlos, who's been quietly refilling appetizer trays nearby, clears his throat nervously. Excuse me, Mr. Blackwood, but Maria speaks Spanish. I've heard her talking to her daughter. The room falls silent. Richard turns slowly, his eyes narrowing as he focuses on Maria. What did you just say? Maria speaks Spanish, Carlos repeats, his voice barely above a whisper. Maybe she could help? Richard's laugh is harsh and disbelieving. Are you serious? You think this woman, he gestures dismissively at Maria, could handle complex legal translation? She can barely handle a wine glass without spilling it, but something in Richard's eyes suggests he's desperate enough to consider even the most ridiculous option. The Barcelona deal is worth $50 million. His company's quarterly reports depend on it. The investors have made it clear this is their final offer. Fine, Richard says suddenly, his voice carrying across the room. You want to help, Maria? Here's your chance. He strides to his office and returns with a thick document. This is the contract. 10 pages of complex legal Spanish. If you can translate this perfectly by tomorrow morning, I'll give you my entire monthly salary, $25,000. The crowd gasps. Several people laugh, thinking this is some kind of elaborate joke. Maria stands frozen, the champagne tray still in her hands. But, Richard continues, his smile turning cruel, when you fail, and you will fail, you're fired. No severance, no references, nothing. Do we have a deal? The room holds its breath. Maria looks around at the faces staring at her, some amused, some pitying, all convinced they're about to witness a predictable humiliation. She thinks of Isabella, of the rent money she doesn't have, of the years of silent endurance. She sets down the champagne tray and walks toward Richard. We have a deal. The document feels familiar in Maria's hands as she accepts it from Richard. The paper is thick, expensive, with the letterhead of Constructora Barcelona, a company she recognizes from her previous life. As her eyes scan the first page, her expression doesn't change, but internally she's already identified 3 major red flags that would make any competent lawyer run screaming. Well? Richard's voice drips with mockery. Having second thoughts already? Maria looks up at him calmly. May I have a pen and paper to write the translation? The crowd murmurs with anticipation. Someone has started recording on their phone. Richard's business partner, James Morrison, whispers loudly enough for everyone to hear. This is going to be painful to watch. Maria takes the offered pen and begins to read aloud in Spanish, her pronunciation crisp and flawless. The murmurs die away as her voice carries across the room with unexpected authority. She's not stumbling over words or pausing to think. She's reading as naturally as if the document were written in English. Artículo primero. La Constructora Barcelona se compromete a la construcción de un complejo en la costa americana. Maria begins, then seamlessly transitions to English. Article 1. Barcelona, construction, commits to building a luxury tourist complex on the American coast. The Spanish investor Don Carlos Mendez, who's been watching with polite interest, suddenly straightens in his chair. His wife leans forward, her eyes widening. Maria continues reading, but then she stops. Mr. Blackwood, I need to point out some issues with this contract before we proceed. Richard's face flushes red. Issues? You're supposed to translate, not analyze. Just do what you're told. Article 7 states that all construction permits will be handled by the Spanish company. Maria continues steadily. But American law requires domestic permitting. This clause would make the contract legally unenforceable. Don Carlos Mendez goes pale. His wife whispers something urgent in his ear. Furthermore, Maria continues, Article 12 includes a clause that would transfer property ownership to the Spanish company after completion, with payment contingent on tourism revenue. That's mathematically impossible to achieve based on the projected visitor numbers. The room is dead silent now. Richard's mouth opens and closes like a fish gasping for air. Maria pulls out her phone and dials a number. Hola, Ricardo? Sí, soy Maria Santos. Necesito que conformes algo sobre Constructora Barcelona. She speaks rapidly, in Spanish, her voice carrying the authority of someone used to making important calls. The voice on the other end is clear enough for several people to hear. Maria, ¿dónde has mosto? We've been trying to reach you for months. That Barcelona company you warned us about last year? They're under investigation for international fraud. Maria thanks the caller and hangs up. She turns to face Don Carlos Mendez, switching to Spanish. Señor Mendez, I believe you know exactly what I'm talking about. Don Carlos stands abruptly, his face red with embarrassment and anger. This is not what we discussed, he stammers in heavily accented English. I was told this was a simple businessman, not someone who could read, Maria asks quietly. The implications hit the room like a physical blow. Don Carlos and his wife gather their things hastily, muttering apologies about misunderstandings and needing to consult with their legal team. Within minutes, they're gone, leaving behind a $50 million deal in shambles. Richard stands in the middle of his own living room, surrounded by his wealthy friends, looking like a man who's just watched his empire crumble. You set me up, he whispers. You planned this whole thing. I planned nothing, Maria replies calmly. You created this situation. You insisted I translate the document. I simply did what you asked. But how did you? Who are you? Richard's voice is barely audible. Maria reaches into her uniform pocket and pulls out her phone again. This time she opens a video call. The screen shows a distinguished-looking man in his 60s, sitting in what appears to be a university office. "Hello, Maria," the man says warmly. "I see you've finally decided to come out of retirement." "Hello, Dr. Peterson," Maria replies. "Would you mind confirming my identity for these people?" Dr. Peterson adjusts his glasses and looks directly into the camera. "Ladies and gentlemen, you're speaking with Dr. Maria Santos, former professor of applied linguistics at Columbia University. She holds a PhD in comparative literature from Harvard, speaks 7 languages fluently, and has consulted for Fortune 500 companies on international contract negotiations. She's also published 3 books on cross-cultural communication and has over 200 peer-reviewed articles in academic journals." The room erupts in shocked whispers. Someone drops a wine glass, the sound of shattering crystal echoing through the sudden chaos. "Maria," Dr. Peterson continues, "when are you coming back to us? The department has been holding your position open." Maria touches the gold ring on her finger, the ring that now makes perfect sense to everyone watching. It's not just jewelry, it's a symbol of her membership in the International Council of Linguistic Studies. "Thank you, Dr. Peterson. I'll call you tomorrow." She ends the call and turns back to Richard, who looks like he's seen a ghost. "You asked who I am, Mr. Blackwood. I'm someone who chose to work as your housekeeper for 3 years. The question is, why do you think I made that choice?" The silence in the room is deafening as the full weight of Maria's revelation settles over the gathered crowd. Richard's face cycles through a rainbow of emotions: shock, embarrassment, anger, and finally a desperate attempt to regain control of the situation. "This is impossible," he says, his voice cracking slightly. "You're lying. You forged this whole thing somehow." He turns to his guests, spreading his arms wide. "Don't you see what's happening here? She's been deceiving us all. She came here under false pretenses, hiding her identity, probably planning to steal corporate secrets or—" "Stop." Maria's voice cuts through his desperate rambling with quiet authority. "You're embarrassing yourself, but Richard is beyond reason now. The man who built his fortune on the premise of his own superiority cannot accept that he's been outsmarted by someone he considered inferior. You want to know what I think? I think you're running some kind of con game. I think you're probably not even a real professor. I think—" "Mr. Blackwood." Dr. Peterson's voice crackles through Maria's phone, which she's turned back on. "I can have Columbia's registrar office send you Dr. Santos' complete academic record within the hour. I can also provide you with a list of the major corporations she's consulted for, including 3 companies that are represented in your room tonight." A woman in an elegant black dress steps forward. "Maria? Dr. Santos?" Her voice is trembling with recognition. "I'm Jennifer Walsh from Walsh Industries. You saved us from a disastrous merger with that German company 3 years ago. We've been trying to find you ever since." Another voice from the crowd. "She consulted for us too. Prevented a $12 million mistake in our Tokyo expansion." Richard's face turns a deeper shade of red. "Even if that's true, it doesn't change the fact that she lied to me. She took this job under false pretenses. She's been spying on me for 3 years. Maria looks at him with something that might be pity. "Mr. Blackwood, do you want to know why I really took this job?" The room leans forward, hungry for the answer. "My daughter Isabella was diagnosed with a rare autoimmune condition when she was 5 years old. The treatment isn't covered by standard insurance, and the only specialist who could help her is in New York. I needed a job that would provide health insurance and allow me to stay close to her." Maria's voice remains steady, but there's a new depth to it. "I was overqualified for many positions and underqualified for others because I'd been out of the workforce caring for her. When I saw your ad for a housekeeper, I thought it would be temporary, just until I could get back on my feet. So you decided to spy on me." "I decided to clean your house and take care of your property. Nothing more." Maria pauses, then reaches into her other pocket and pulls out a small digital recorder. "But you made that impossible." The sight of the recorder sends a chill through the room. Richard's eyes widen with genuine fear. For 3 years, I've listened to you make jokes about my kind. I've heard you tell your friends that people like me are genetically inferior. I've watched you treat every person of color in your employ as if they were less than human. Maria's voice never rises, but the power behind it is unmistakable. I started recording our conversations 6 months ago, when you began the campaign to have me fired. She presses play. Richard's voice fills the room, crystal clear and undeniably his own. The problem with these people is that they have no ambition, no intellectual curiosity. They're content to do menial work because, frankly, that's all they're capable of. The recording continues with more damning statements, each one more revealing than the last. The guests begin to shift uncomfortably, many pulling out their phones to check social media or make quiet phone calls. "You can't use that," Richard shouts. "It's illegal to record someone without their permission." James Morrison, Richard's business partner and a practicing attorney, speaks up quietly. "Actually, Richard, New York is a one-party consent state. If Maria was present during the conversations, the recordings are perfectly legal." Furthermore, Maria adds, "I have documentation of every instance of wage theft, every discriminatory action, every violation of labor law that's occurred in this house over the past 3 years. I've been building a case not to destroy you, Mr. Blackwood, but to protect myself and the other employees here." The crowd is now actively backing away from Richard, as if his prejudice might be contagious. Several people have already slipped out the door. Richard's business partner approaches him with a grim expression. "Richard, I think it's time we had a private conversation about the future of the company." But Richard isn't ready to surrender. In a final, desperate gambit, he points an accusing finger at Maria. "You think you're so smart? You think you've won? I'll sue you for fraud, for misrepresentation, for breach of contract. I'll make sure you never work in this city again." Maria looks at him for a long moment, then shakes her head slowly. "Mr. Blackwood, you still don't understand what just happened here. You didn't lose because I'm smarter than you. You lost because you refused to see people as they really are. You created your own blindness, and then you blamed others for living in the darkness you created." She walks over to where Carlos is standing near the kitchen door, still clutching his serving tray. "Carlos, you don't have to worry about your wife's visa application anymore. I know people who can help." She turns to Mrs. Henderson, who's been watching from the corner with her mouth agape. "Mrs. Henderson, I never reported your skimming from the household accounts, but I could have. Maybe think about that before you mistreat the next person who works under you." Finally, Maria turns back to Richard. "You asked me to translate a document for your salary. I did exactly what you asked. $25,000, as agreed." "I'm not paying you a penny," Richard snarls. "Actually, you are." Maria holds up her phone, showing that it's been recording this entire conversation. "You made that promise in front of 30 witnesses and a live stream that now has over 50,000 viewers. The contract is legally binding, and I have multiple lawyers in this room who can confirm that." Richard looks around desperately but finds no allies. His guests are either gone or actively avoiding eye contact. His business partner is already on the phone with what sounds like a crisis management team. "You know what the real tragedy is, Mr. Blackwood?" Maria says as she heads toward the door. "I actually enjoyed working here. I liked taking care of your house, your dogs, your garden. I found dignity in honest work. But you couldn't allow that, could you? You had to make it about my race, my education, my worth as a human being." She pauses at the threshold. "I quit, effective immediately. You can mail my final paycheck to my home address. All of it." As Maria walks out the door, she hears Richard's voice behind her, cracked and desperate. "You can't just leave. You can't just walk away after destroying everything." Without turning around, Maria calls back, Mr. Blackwood, I'm not destroying anything. I'm simply refusing to be invisible anymore. 6 months later, Maria sits in a sunlit classroom in East Harlem, watching 20 adult students practice their English pronunciation. The room buzzes with a dozen different languages as people help each other with difficult words. In the corner, Isabella does her homework, occasionally looking up to smile at her mother with undisguised pride. "Mrs. Santos," says Carmen, a young woman from El Salvador. "I got the job at the hospital. They said my English was perfect." Maria beams at her. "That's wonderful, Carmen. You worked so hard for this." The Santos Center for Language and Cultural Exchange opened its doors 3 months ago, funded by a combination of Maria's settlement from Richard's company, donations from the viral video supporters, and grants from organizations impressed by her story. The center offers free English classes, translation services, and legal aid for immigrant families navigating the complex systems of American bureaucracy. Carlos enters the classroom carrying a tray of food from his new restaurant, La Cocina de Carlos, which has become a gathering place for the community. His wife, Sofia, who finally received her visa, helps him serve the evening meal. That's become a tradition at the center. "Maria," Carlos says, setting down the tray. "There's a reporter outside who wants to interview you for that documentary they're making." Maria shakes her head. "Tell them what I tell everyone. The story isn't about me. It's about what happens when we start seeing each other as human beings instead of stereotypes." The viral video of that night at Richard's house has been viewed over 10 million times. The hashtag #SeeMe has sparked a movement of people sharing their own experiences of being underestimated, overlooked, or dismissed because of their race, class, or background. Maria receives dozens of messages daily from people who say her story inspired them to speak up against discrimination in their own lives. Richard's company went bankrupt within 4 months. The board of directors, facing lawsuits and boycotts, had no choice but to remove him from all positions. His house was sold at auction. He now works as a mid-level manager at a small real estate firm, and according to Carlos, who still has friends in that world, he's been attending sensitivity training sessions. "Do you think he learned anything?" Isabella asks one evening as they walk home from the center. Maria considers this carefully. "I think he learned that actions have consequences. Whether he learned to see people differently, that's up to him." Isabella nods sagely. At 9 years old, she's already more worldly than many adults. Her mother's courage has made her a minor celebrity at school, but, more importantly, it's taught her that standing up for what's right is worth any personal cost. "Mommy," Isabella says as they reach their apartment building, "Mrs. Garcia asked me again if I want to skip a grade. I said yes this time." Maria stops walking and looks at her daughter. "Are you sure? It's a big change." "I'm sure," Isabella says with quiet confidence. "Someone told me that knowledge is the only thing that can never be taken away. I want to learn everything I can." Maria smiles, recognizing her own words reflected back at her. "Then we'll make it happen, mi amor." That night, after Isabella is asleep, Maria sits at her laptop, responding to emails from around the world. A teacher in London wants to know how to help immigrant students feel more confident. A lawyer in Los Angeles is asking for advice on a discrimination case. A group of college students in Chicago wants to start a center like hers. She answers each message carefully, remembering Dr. Elena's words about knowledge being infinite. Every person she helps, every mind she changes, every stereotype she challenges, it all ripples outward in ways she may never fully understand. A new email appears in her inbox, the subject line reading, "From a former colleague." Maria opens it. Curious. "Dear Dr. Santos," it begins, "my name is Jennifer Walsh. We met briefly at Richard Blackwood's house 6 months ago. I wanted to thank you for what you did that night, but more importantly, I wanted to apologize. I was in that room when he said those terrible things about you and others, and I said nothing. I told myself it wasn't my place to interfere, but I know now that silence makes me complicit. I've been thinking about your story every day since then, and I've started speaking up in my own company when I hear discriminatory comments. It's not much, but it's a start. Thank you for showing me that courage isn't just about grand gestures. It's about refusing to be invisible when it matters most. Maria reads the email twice, then forwards it to her inspiration folder, a collection of messages from people who've been moved to action by her story. There are hundreds of them now, from all over the world, in dozens of languages. She closes the laptop and walks to the window, looking out at the city lights. Somewhere out there in offices and schools and homes, people are having difficult conversations about race and class and assumptions. Some are small conversations between friends or family members. Others are bigger. Boardroom discussions about hiring practices, school board meetings about educational equity, city council sessions about community resources. Maria touches the gold ring on her finger, thinking about Elena and the path that led her to this moment. She never planned to become a symbol of resistance or a voice for change. She just wanted to take care of her daughter and do honest work. But sometimes, she's learned, the world decides you're needed for something bigger than your original plans. Tomorrow, she'll teach her classes and help her students navigate the complex system of American society. She'll translate documents and offer legal advice and provide a safe space for people who feel invisible in their own communities. She'll continue the work of building bridges between cultures and challenging people to see beyond their assumptions. But tonight, she's simply a mother who kept her promise to her daughter, to never give up, to never stop fighting for what's right, and to never let anyone make her feel less than whole. The story of Maria Santos ends here, but the story it inspired continues every day, in every person who chooses to stand up rather than stay silent, to see rather than assume, to build rather than tear down. The world is still waiting for that next story, the next person who will refuse to be invisible when it matters most. In the end, Maria's greatest victory wasn't exposing Richard's prejudice or saving his company from fraud. It was proving that dignity, intelligence, and worth aren't determined by the color of your skin or the uniform you wear. They're determined by how you choose to treat others, and how you choose to respond when faced with the choice between silence and truth. The question now is, when faced with that same choice, what will you do?